Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
The holiday season officially starts when you get that first card in the mail. Shutterfly makes it easy to add more meaning to the everyday with hundreds of holiday card designs that can be personalized in seconds with your favorite photos from this year. Select your greeting, customize the color, and even add little extras like personalized foil to make a holiday card that really shines. Enjoy 40% off with code SMILE40 at Shutterfly.com and send something meaningful this year. See site for more details.
I'm James McComb, reporting live from home in my bathrobe and slippers. Tonight, we're talking Dunkin' Polar Peppermint Coffee. Gene's here with the latest. Gene, do you copy?
The home with Dunkin' is where you want to be.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to this edition of There Can Only Be One, the podcast that puts together the all-star best-of playlists of your favorite bands and artists, and a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. Now, if you've listened to this show enough, you know that I'm Canadian. We are broadcasting here out of the wonderful GTA in the province of Ontario, so I'm a big proponent of talking about Canadian artists. And today, we've got a good one because we're going to be talking about Melanie Doane. And here to join me for this trip, Joseph Whalen's back on the show. Joseph, how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm good, Jason. I'm happy to be back, and I'm happy to be talking about an artist that I honestly, and I'll be completely transparent about this from the get-go, as somebody that is from the East Coast, I hadn't heard of Melanie Doane. So you opened new horizons for me, Jason. So I'm very excited for this episode specifically. And yeah, this took me on a journey. I have to be honest, and I'll get into that in a minute. But this took me on a damn journey, and I loved it.
Yeah, there are some times when more often than not, I will let the guest pick the episode. But every now and then, I like to get my picks in there as well. And I will admit, there is an album in this discography that I'm surprised I didn't burn through the disc with my CD player because it got played a ton of. But I know that you're not the only person who hasn't heard of Melanie Doane. So let me give you a little background on Melanie before we get into this episode and the picks. So Melanie is actually the daughter of J. Chalmers Doane, who is a member of the Order of Canada and has been a big proponent of teaching music in schools by using the ukulele. And that's something that Melanie herself has actually carried on as well. She helped create the Doane Music School, which you can find at uschool.ca, which helps put ukuleles into school and teach music through ukulele. She's also the co-creator of Ukulele U, which is a kids show that can be seen on CBC. And there's episodes that you can find on YouTube as well, for those of our listeners outside of Canada. Again, using ukulele as a teaching tool. She also has her own YouTube show, U School TV, on YouTube as well. Also, we've talked about her brother on this show before when we did the Harem Scarum episode, because she is the sister to Creighton Doane, drummer extraordinaire. So it's a bit of a musical family, the Doane clan, that is. So we're about to go through the 5 albums in her discography. As always, we're not talking about any live albums or any songs that were just released as a single. Now, we're also not covering the Harvest Train EP because it's not on Spotify and I couldn't find all the songs on YouTube. So it's not really fair to talk about an album that you can't listen to the whole thing of, but there are songs from the Harvest Train EP out there to be heard. We're just not going to cover it. We're only covering the 5 full-length studio albums that she put out. And we're going to start in 1996 with the release of Shakespearean Fish. There were 3 singles off of this one: Babe in the Woods, Tell You Stories, and My Sister Sings. If there's a voice that sounds familiar on this disc, it's on the song Tell You Stories, because that song also features Ed Robertson from the Bare Naked Ladies on co-vocals. So Joseph, this is your first dive into Melanie Doane. Your thoughts on this album as a whole?
So that Ed Robertson thing, I didn't know that. That's really cool. That's really funny. I actually didn't know that. But I listened to Tell You Stories, first song on this album. Start listening to it. It is so 90s. Like, you could tell me that this played on Buffy the Vampire Slayer as they were walking into the bronze, and I would believe you. Like, this sounded exactly like one of those songs that you would hear on shows in the 90s like that. So I immediately just loved it. I was just like, okay, well, this is awesome. I love this album. Then you get like Never Doubt I Love, which has that beautiful piano opening, and it's very Sarah McLachlan-esque, which means that it makes me think of sad animal cruelty commercials. Um, Lots of really good tunes on this one, actually. Yeah, like Babe in the Woods goes back to more sort of Buffy the Vampire Slayer vibes. But I went with Salt Water because being an East Coast boy, I asked my Newfoundland friends and family to send me some salt water so I can appreciate this on a very deep level. And then, the line, and I will cry my salty tears back to you. That's a tough one. And then as the song comes to a close, farewell to Nova Scotia, the seaboard coast, may your mountains dark and dreary be, for when I am far away from the briny ocean toss, will you heave a sign for me, oh, but I miss the sea and I miss seeing you so. That's just poetry. That's just Atlantic Canadian poetry. And so I went with Salt Water off of this one. But yeah, Jason, I did not expect first song on this album to just hit me so hard with like, this is just such a product of its time. It's super, super 90s.
It's funny. We're going to get to that a little bit, but Melanie Doane clearly had an ability to write songs that catered themselves to pop culture of the time.
Mm-hmm.
We're definitely going to get to that in later albums. I'm really glad you picked up on Never Doubt I Love, because it really is a beautiful song. And I remember I was actually listening to this in the car as I was preparing for the show. And it's like, this is a fantastic ballad. And then you realize that's actually inspired by Hamlet's letter to Ophelia. The album is called Shakespearean Fish. So, there is that. But the funny thing too is that even the song Shakespearean Fish has lyrics adapted from a poem by Yeats. So it's like, damn, there's a lot of thought to it. And kind of like when you were on the episode for talking about Sloan, there are a lot of Canadian references in a lot of her lyrics. So, if you like your Canadian music, you're definitely going to feel very Canadian listening to some of these songs. I will admit, though, that I'm a sucker for playful lyrics sometimes. And for me, that's Babe in the Woods. There's a lot of nursery rhyme kind of references to it, but it's also a really good mid-tempo song. It's a playful song is what it is. I had Tell You Stories and Never Doubt I Love on my short list, but this first album, like, you can hear the groundwork for what's to come in future discs.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. But I was honestly kind of surprised at the turn that the next album took.
Oh, just a little bit. And for the record, this next album is the one that I played the ever-loving crap out of, and I still do today. We are talking about Adam's Rib, released September 28th, 1998. There were 4 singles off of this one: Adam's Rib, Waiting for the Tide, Goliath, and Happy Homemaker. And since you mentioned it on the last album, there were songs from this album that were featured in a number of different TV shows, including Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Party of 5. And she won a few awards for this one. At the 1999 Junos, she won for Best New Artist. At the 1999 Canadian Rock Music Awards, the album won for Most Charted Rock Artist. And at the East Coast Music Awards that year, nominated for Factor Recording of the Year, lost to Of Your Son by Bruce Guthrie. Nominated for Female Recording of the Year, lost to Natalie McMaster. And if you're going to lose to someone, Natalie McMaster, there's no shame there at all. Adam's Rib was nominated for Song of the Year, lost to Fallen by Bruce Guthrie. Melanie and Rick Neer, who was the co-writer, nominated for Adam's Rib for Songwriter of the Year, lost to Bruce Guthrie for Falling, and nominated for Pop Rock Recording of the Year, lost to Bruce Guthrie. This album has so many good songs. Like, when I think about Canadian front-to-back albums, this is one of them. It is chock-a-block full of songs that are going to get stuck in your head, and the guitar work is fantastic on it. The violin work on it is absolutely fantastic. Like, Melanie Doane is a fan-freaking-tastic violinist.
Yeah. So this is where, Jason, I mean, and it was present in the last album. It was definitely present in Shakespearean Fish, but I just didn't really notice the strings. They weren't sort of as prominently featured as they like. This is just like fiddle. Like this is just straight at you. Here's some fiddle, and I loved it. Like it was a bit of a turn for me just because it was so much more prominently featured on these tracks. And Adam's Rib comes right out at you, and I love that tune to open this song, open this album up. Happy Homemaker's a great tune. Yeah, like there's a lot on here, Jason, but I was not expecting the turn that it took from one album to the other.
Yeah, this has a bit more of a rockier vibe to it.
Yeah.
But even though it also has a bit of a traditional vibe as well, because there's an instrumental track on here called Mel's Rock Pile.
Mhm.
And if you like Ashley McIsaac and what he brought to the table, there is some fantastic maritime Celtic vibes in that track.
Oh yeah, and I majorly appreciated that.
And the funny thing is, like, a lot of these songs were used in shows. Like, I Can't Take My Eyes Off You. It was used in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It was used in That's Life. It was used in Baywatch Hawaii. It was used in Resurrection Boulevard. Like, a lot of these songs were used in Resurrection Boulevard. So off of this album, what did you go with?
Well, I just want to point out, Jason, that I did not know about the Buffy the Vampire Slayer thing. So that's actually very funny because I truly did not know that. And in the notes for I Can't Take My Eyes Off You, I said back to 90s Buffy vibes. So I was on the nose. I hit it on the nose.
You called it. You were right. Buffy the Vampire Slayer knew what songs to pick. But that was the thing, too. You think about some of those shows in the 90s. You think about like the Dawson's Creeks and the Buffy the Vampire Slayers and the Party of Fives. There were a lot of up and coming artists that got a lot of exposure from those kind of, even Smallville had a ton of those kind of songs as well. So, that late 90s, early 2000s, pop rock friendly vibes, like she had it written down perfectly for her songs.
Oh, 100%. And yeah, it was, that's just very funny to me that is actually a song that was featured on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I have to go back and find that episode now. But so there's so many good tunes on here. There Is No Beautiful. Like I love the reliance on the violin fiddle on this album. It's another solid tune. Mel's Rock Pile, as you talked about, I just have fiddle, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point written down. The space between us, I love it. It has a great build. But I went with Goliath because Goliath just immediately grabbed me. It's got a great hook. And honestly, it reminds me of a song by Crush called Here. And Crush's band features Corey Tetford, now plays with Alan Doyle. They're formed in Halifax as well. So they're in and around that, Atlantic Canadian region. And it has a very similar, just kind of like tickled my brain a little bit. It just it's got some similarities there. And I really appreciated that. But yeah, Goliath just immediately came out and grabbed you right off the top. I love the opening. And then, it's just, I love as well, it's kind of present in her lyrics as we go along. There's this sort of propensity to talk about like nursery rhymes, talk about, common expressions, like just things that are like a little bit, they definitely are sort of, everyone can grasp it more or less is a way of saying it. It's just kind of very interesting to me that's something that's very present in her lyrics as we go along, but it's certainly present here, talking about a beanstalk, talking about all that. So I love this tune and great album. And like I said, it was a bit of an unexpected turn for me to go from like, you're talking about like something a little bit more mellow on Shakespearean Fish and then just comes out swinging with the fiddle. I loved it.
That is absolutely awesome. Yeah. No, like when you think about it, Goliath is, there's a reason why it was one of the songs released as a single. When you think about like the rockier, radio friendly songs, Goliath really has a lot of those ear candy parts to it that lend itself really well to, to radio. I will admit that my short list is pretty much the entire album. This is literally one of those albums where I could go front to back and like, if we ever did a spin shuffle skip on this episode, the skip would be the hardest pick because I don't have a skip off this disc. This is one of those seminal albums for me that came out in the 90s where I just listened to it all the time. So the good thing is I didn't have to go back and re-listen to this album because A, I knew it already, but B, I knew what my pick was off this album immediately. And that was The Space Between Us. there was something about the almost staccato-ness to the bowing in this song on the violin, but also you have some really cool, very reverby guitar and the chord progression when you get to the actual chorus itself. Like, it just stops you dead in your tracks. And I will admit, I am a sucker for fantastic chord progression. And I'm surprised that this is one of those songs that actually never made it to a TV show. It feels like every other song, maybe save for Mel's Rock Pile, found itself in TV or film. But The Space Between Us, to me, is one of the most cinematic songs on the album, but yet never made that transition.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, I guess. Like, it's one of those things that, you know, with those shows, as we talked about with like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Smallville and any show of that nature, right? Where it's like, I guess like there's a desire to just find a song that really fits the aesthetic of what the scene is. And then maybe that was just one of those songs that didn't, even though it has all the characteristics of songs that would be, of a song that would be in one of those shows. Like, it's a very interesting thing to think about.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And by the way, all 5 of the albums that we're talking about are on Spotify. And if you go to the website for notthatbadcast.com and the episode page for this show, you will see the playlists for that we are making from these 5 discs. So by all means, listen to the songs, have a deep dive, and then let us know what songs you would have picked, because there are some fantastic songs still to come. And yeah, listen to the albums. Have a good deep dive yourself. I'd love to hear what you thought of these discs.
This episode is brought to you by Etsy.
Oh.
Hear that?
Okay. Thank you.
Etsy knows these aren't the sounds of holiday gifting. Well, not the ones you're hoping for. You want squeals of delight. Happy tears.
How did you?
And spontaneously written songs of joy.
I am so happy. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, the song needs a bit of work, but anyway, to get those reactions, make sure everyone on your list feels heard with handmade, handpicked, and designed gifts from small shops on Etsy. Gifts like personalized jewelry, custom artwork, cozy style items, vintage pieces, and home decor to celebrate all of your favorite people and their specific kind of special. For original gifts that say, I get you, Etsy has it.
This is the sound of your ride home with Dad after he caught you vaping. Awkward, isn't it? Most vapes contain seriously addictive levels of nicotine and disappointment. Know the real cost of vapes. Brought to you by the FDA.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
You Are What You Love, released May 6, 2003. There were 3 singles off of this one: Still Desire You, Wilma or a Betty Man, and You Are What You Love. And once again, Melanie Doane has tapped into the pop culture zeitgeist because songs off this disc appeared in the show That's Life, and the song Bionic actually appeared in Dawson's Creek. Again, one of those 90s brings you all the good music kind of stuff. At the 2004 East Coast Music Awards, nominated for Entertainer of the Year, lost to Crush, the band that you mentioned. There you go. Also nominated for Female Recording of the Year, lost to Damnit Doyle, and nominated for Pop Recording of the Year, lost to Davnet by Damnit Doyle. A bit of a turn from Adam's Rib, but still very much that Melanie Doane sound. Your thoughts going from disc to disc to disc as we get to this third album?
Yeah, so I think I'm always immediately, the first song on each record has had this is where I talk about the journey that we went on, right? Like the first song on Shakespearean Fish, I'm immediately transported to, okay, very 90s. Like this is a very sort of, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, all that. And then, Adam's Rib, definitely a little bit more sort of like Celtic, the fiddle, everything like that. And then this one, immediately I'm struck by it's a little bit rockier. Like it's got a little bit more of that rock feel. At least it did to me. That's what I noticed right out of the bat. And I feel like early on in this album, it went from when I was talking about Shakespearean Fish, where it had the very sort of 90s vibes. This is distinctly early 2000s. Like this is very early 2000s to me. And it's like, it's got the catchy hooks. It's got the guitar. It's got the satisfying hooks that all like that, you know, sort of resolve in a very nice way. Like, yeah, like that's what I immediately sort of got from this album. And yeah, it still has all the elements that you'd expect from Melanie Doane. And based off of the previous two albums, that's what we, you know, have come to expect from her. The fiddle, the violin, all of it. But yeah, definitely like noticed a little bit more of a rockier sort of a twinge.
Well, especially on the track Bionic, like that.
Yes,
when that song comes on, all of a sudden you're like, holy crap. Like there's some definitely harder vibes. And when you think about it too, you know, like anyone who watched the Woodstock 99 documentary, you know that music was taking that harder edge around that late 90s, early 2000s era. And even other artists, like solo artists, were like, okay, but maybe we need to turn up the volume a little bit. And Bionic really did that. And this album has a ton of great songs, but it still also leans into the lyrical poetry that Melanie Doane puts in. Like we've sat there, we've talked about her violin prowess and her guitar playing and her songwriting, but it's the lyrics as well really kind of play into this album.
Absolutely, Jason. And you know what? It's actually very interesting that you point that out, because I was very close to picking Bionic because it's a rocker and it's got a great hook. Obviously, Still Desire You is a great tune. As I Am has a great hook. But I went with the song that has no lyrics at all. I went with Mayor of Melonville because it slaps so hard. The fiddle and the guitar, like it is just maybe like, and I'm not somebody that typically like, you know, like we were talking about Sloan, we were talking about Jim Croce. Lyrics do a lot of the heavy lifting for me. So I am really shocked at myself that I took a song that was just an instrumental, but this is like one of those ones that it speaks very much to my sort of East Coast sensibilities of like, you just get a fiddle and you just grind away at that thing for 3 minutes and it's going to be great. Like it'll be a great tune. And that's what this is. And then the guitar comes in, fills in a little bit. And then, yeah, honestly, like this is just going to immediately just be added to like my workout playlist. Like this is, I don't know how this isn't like, this should be a goal song for like some East, like Quebec Major Junior Hockey League team out there, like somewhere. Like the Moncton Wildcats should have this as their goal song if they don't already. If they don't, then they failed themselves. This is easy. Like just do it tomorrow. Everyone will love it. Print money, whatever. This song is fantastic. I had to go with this one, but like you said, I mean, Bionic has that sound that I would typically would very much be a fan of, and I am a fan of, but I would usually pick a song like Bionic. But here I was just like, you know what? I got to go with Mayor of Melonville. And it's got a great name too.
Right? I have, you know, every now and then I like to try and put these thoughts out there into the ether, and maybe somewhere along the way, something is going to manifest from these, you know, rando thoughts that come from some idiot in the basement with a microphone. That is me. But I'm going to put this out there right now. And I know she would never listen to the show because, well, no one listens to the show, but that's okay. But if Lindsey Sterling is ever listening to this show, if she's ever doing a Canadian tour, not one of her Christmas tours, because that's kind of themed and whatnot, but if Lindsey Sterling ever did a Canadian tour, Melanie Doane should be the opening act for Lindsey Sterling, because I have a feeling there's a lot of what Melanie Doane does, especially with the violin work, that would really play well to the Lindsey Sterling audience. So, you know, if you are a Lindsey Sterling fan, by all means, have a listen to some of this stuff, because I think you're going to find some stuff you really like on this.
100%.
I went with the opening track, Still Desire You. And as I mentioned, as far as the lyrics go, this is one of those ones where, you know, you have a song that's about someone's like, yeah, you have a lot to be desired, but yet I still desire you kind of thing. It's one of those like, you're okay, but for some reason it kind of works for you. And it's very like, it sounds kind of like pseudo angry, but yet really there's some heart to the message as well. I had Bionic and Wilma or a Betty Man on my short list, because Wilma or a Betty Man, that's just fun lyrically, you know?
It is. It really is.
It feels like one of those questions you put out on like Instagram. Well, are you a Wilma or are you a Betty man? So
Yeah.
Also,
it's one of those. Yeah, it's definitely like the quizzes in like the not the teen magazines, but then like it's kind of like one of those things.
It was like one of those BuzzFeed kind of things, At the same time as you're trying to find out your Hogwarts house, you also have to find out if you're a Wilma or a Betty man.
100%. It goes hand in hand. You have to know. If you don't know one, then I mean, what are you doing?
Right. That's also like, are you a Ginger guy or are you a Marianne guy? Have you watched Gilligan's Island? 1,000 Nights, released independently July 1st, 2008, and then re-released in 2009. There was one single off of this one, Songbird, which also features the one and only Jim Cuddy on vocals. And if you're Canadian and you hear the name Jim Cuddy and you don't immediately have the chills from his vocals, then you are not Canadian right. But there's also appearances from Ron Sexsmith on here, Ted Dykstra, Emily Claire Barlow, and Catherine Rose. And this album kind of dials it back a little bit. It almost feels very, I don't want to say coffee shop-esque, but it does feel kind of coffee shop-esque.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that vibe too. And I mean, it's got some great covers on it. And I love Melanie Doane's voice for the covers that she does on this album.
Mm-hmm. So off of this one, and it is a bit of a departure from the past two albums, your pick off of this.
Yeah, and you mentioned it there. It is another instance of not really expecting what I was going to get off of the first track of the album. But, Jason, this was one where I kind of knew where I was going to go before I even listened to it. And it came close because Wildflowers is one of my favorite Tom Petty songs. And she's got a great voice. Like I said, a great voice for the covers that she does on this album. Devoted to You's great. Songbird. I mean, come on, man. Like, I'm a huge, huge fan of Christine McVie. I love Christine McVie and Fleetwood Mac. Probably my favorite member of that band. Not all of my favorite songs are by Christine McVie from Fleetwood Mac, but it comes pretty close. And then Jim Cuddy. Like, Jim Cuddy, man. Like, his voice, like, that is Canada. Like, Jim Cuddy's voice is Canada.
Yeah,
I feel fairly confident saying that. Like, I've seen him. I got to see him live twice in 2017, and it is just like, it's velvety butter, that voice. It is incredible. So yeah, I went with Songbird. It was one of those ones where that we talk about times where you go into an album thinking, okay, well, it's going to be this one, and then it isn't. This is one of those times where I went into an album thinking it was okay. Yeah, it's going to be that one. And it was that one. So had to go that way. It was an obvious answer, but I had to do it, Jason.
See, I thought I knew what I was getting into, and it's one of those things where you see Jim Cuddy and you think immediately like, oh yeah, no, this will be the one. This will be the one. But no, I ended up going a little bit later into the album and I went with All the Diamonds. Now, I'm not really the biggest country guy at all. I will admit this. But as I've been doing the show and listening to a lot more different genres of music that I'm used to, I'm starting to pick up on certain things where it's like, okay, I can understand this. And if you like the Chicks, then you're going to love this because the combination of Emily Claire Barlow and Catherine Rose with Melanie Doane, it has that Chicks kind of feel. Like they all sound fantastic together.
Yeah. And this was an album that I think really displayed, like, and you hear it with Melanie on her own too, with her backing vocals that are, some beautiful, beautiful harmonies. But it's always nice when you hear that juxtaposed with a different voice. So that was something that was really prominent to me on Songbird. Same thing when with Devoted to You. But yeah, you're absolutely right. With those two on All the Diamonds, it is a beautiful, beautiful tune.
And by the way, if the names Emily Claire Barlow and Catherine Rose sound somewhat familiar, let me give you a little background here, because Emily Claire Barlow has done a lot of voice work for television, including voicing Sailor Mars from the Sailor Moon TV show.
No way.
Catherine Rose, we've actually talked about her over on It's Not That Bad because she was in National Lampoon's Senior Trip, and we've done an episode on that film already. So I can't believe we actually have the cross episode, cross podcast connection, but yet here we are with the Melanie Doane album.
This is it. This is how the magic happens, Jason. You just threw this out there and it all weaves together seamlessly. You wanted to do this Melanie Doane episode and we weave it all together. It's beautiful.
Exactly. We end our journey in 2011 in the release of The Emerald City. There was one single off of this one, Sweet on You, which reached number 1 on the East Coast Countdown. Did a lot of work with the brother Creighton Doane on this one and kind of returns it to that rock vibe that you got on Adam's Rib and You Are What You Love. So shifting gears from 1,000 Nights, going back to that almost familiar sound, your thoughts on this disc?
I think it's possible. I think this was my favorite from start to finish. I think this was the one that I just enjoyed the most, where it was like, start with Ruby Slippers. That's a good start to this. And I'm not a big movie guy, but even I got the reference in this song. So that obviously The Wizard of Oz. I was going to make a bad joke where I said it was a different movie, but I can't make myself look that stupid, Jason. I do that easily enough as it is. Sweet on You, which was funny, was that you mentioned that one. That one, I want to go out on a limb. That's maybe the most Canadian love song that's ever been written. It's got to be up there. At least I don't know what the competition is, but it's got to be up there. But yeah, no, truly, I think this was maybe my favorite of her catalog from start to finish. So yeah, this journey wrapped up very nicely with this album.
Oh, absolutely. And really, when you think about 5 discs and all the songs that are on these 5 discs, like, you really run the gamut from sweet to instrumental musical prowess to radio friendly, very pop culture zeitgeist, made for TV, made for film, kind of radio friendly songs, to classic covers. You get the full gamut in just 5 discs. And again, if you do like Maritime singer-songwriter, Celtic Canadian feels, you really can't go wrong.
Absolutely not. Yeah, this is a pleasant journey to be on, Jason. I'm happy that you introduced me to the excellence that is Melanie Doane.
All right, so we got one last pick. What'd you pick off the Emerald City?
So yeah, this was a difficult one, like I said, because I think this was maybe my favorite from start to finish. I love the last track, Make God Laugh. Like, it's a really cool song that features one of my favorite expressions, the classic, make plans, God laughs. That's a really cool thing to write a song about. Humpty, which I talked about earlier, where she uses these nursery rhymes as lyrics and references these nursery rhymes. Humpty Dumpty falling off the wall. It's a really cool thing to write a song about too. And then also the fact that the bass in that song, Jason, and I know that you might appreciate it, the bass line in that song, and I'm not somebody that typically notices bass lines like first and foremost, that one immediately just grabs you. So I really like that. You mentioned the ukulele.
Mm-hmm.
How Can a Girl? The ukulele on How Can a Girl? Like, that was I just love that immediately. Like, I love it when there's a different instrument out of the gate that just grabs you right away. Lots of great Sweet on You, Ruby Slippers, like I said, great tunes. But I went with Disaster Waiting to Happen. It's got a cool intro, and I can very much relate to this song on a deep level. I'm a disaster waiting to happen. I'm the earth just ready to quake. I'm a blind man who's jaywalking. I'm a heart that knows it's gonna break. I love the line, I'm a blind. I don't know what about that I love, but it's a really good line. And yeah, honestly, it's just one of those songs that I was just like, you know what? It's kind of got that, when I talked about when we did the Paramore episode off of After Laughter, my favorite song on that album is Caught in the Middle, which there's a part in that, which is the bridge that goes, I don't need no help. I can sabotage me by myself. This song, very much of that ilk. And I don't know what about that particular message I gravitate towards. I think it might be pretty obvious, but anyways, I love this song. It's a really good tune. But yeah, overall though, this album start to finish, I was hooked. Like, I was right into it. So yeah, just a really solid piece of work here.
Yeah, I had Disaster Waiting to Happen on my short list, also with Baby Come Home and Back to LA. But I'm going to go with the single off this one. I'm going to go with, as what you say, the most Canadian love song ever, Sweet on You. And aside from the musical, the boppiness, the very Adam's Rib kind of feel to it, and of course, the melodic pre-chorus and the doubling of her vocals on this, like, it's one of those things that you go in and you sing a song, it's okay. But when you start to double the vocals and you really fill it out and you start harmonizing with yourself, like she kills it on this one. But it's the one line in this where, every now and then there's a song that comes on and you get a line just stuck in your head. And we talked about this a lot with the Sloan episode because they have those wonderful little, lyrical turns of phrase. But it's the line, "I'm so low, I'm looking up to see the bottom of the well." And it's just like, how poetic is that? Like it paints the picture perfectly. You don't even really need to think about it too much. But again, this is one of those albums that I didn't really have a chance to listen to it too much before prepping for this episode because I was still stuck on Adam's Rib. Because to me is it's one of those discs that is almost like yearbook worthy.
Yeah.
When you think about it for me, because that 1998 disc, I listened to it way too much. It's almost like one of those, if you were to make a jukebox of every year of your life, what discs are in that jukebox? 1998 Adam's Rib is definitely in that jukebox, but Emerald City is right up there as well. I think you're right. It is one of her better albums.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sweet on You definitely stands out lyrically, musically, and vocally.
Absolutely.
All right. So now we get to the hard part of this. And it's only 5 discs. So maybe it's not too hard, but we'll go down that road anyway. So Joseph, please remind our listeners what songs you picked off of the 5 discs. And if there can only be one Melanie Doane song, what's it going to be?
Oh, man. So off of Shakespearean Fish, I went with Salt Water. Off of Adam's Rib, I went with Goliath. Off of You Are What You Love, I went with Mayor of Melonville. 1,000 Nights, I went with Songbird. And the Emerald City, I went with Disaster Waiting to Happen. Jason, it's only 5. That makes it almost more difficult. This is a difficult choice for me. And honestly, I might even just make it in live in real time because honestly, like I came to this episode and again, it's one of those things. I think it's Songbird. I think Jim Cuddy being in the mix makes it Songbird for me. You know what? I'm going to lock it in. It's Songbird. But Disaster Waiting to Happen is so close. Like it's so close. Mayor of Melonville, like I said, goes so hard. Great workout track. Whatever QMJHL team makes it their goal song is going to be so happy. But yeah, no, I think I have to go with Songbird. I love this cover. I love all the covers on that album, to be honest. 1,000 Nights is a great album too. I think my preference was Emerald City start to finish. Adam's Rib is also like you said, it's a great album too. All of them are, honestly. Like this was a really eye-opening experience for me. Like Goliath was one of the songs that I was very early on thinking, okay, that's got to be it. But Songbird, I mean, it's a beautiful tune, written by one of my favorite artists with a appearance from one of my other favorite artists, and Melanie Doane is excellent herself. So I'm going to go with Songbird.
See, I find it interesting because every now and then, I'll jump into an episode never having really heard a single song from the artist. And then, I get to be in discovery mode. So now I get to go the other way and go, I'm in the driver's seat this time. Now you have to be in discovery mode. And I love that you actually really enjoyed this collection because every now and then I'm sitting there going, am I the only person who likes this? Well, maybe not. You just have to get that out there. Melanie Doane, listen to those discs.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Off Shakespearean Fish, I went with Babe in the Woods. From Adam's Rib, I went with The Space Between Us. From You Are What You Love, I went with Still Desire You. Off of 1,000 Nights, I went with All the Diamonds. And off of the Emerald City, I went with Sweet on You. When I went into this episode, I thought I knew what the song was going to be. And I still do. It's The Space Between Us. It's one of those things where it's just the musical layering of that song. And it just gets stuck in my head every time. And it's not a radio friendly song. It's not one that ended up in a TV show. It has no other frame of reference except for in my mind in that time when that disc came out. And this is the song that musically just hooked into my brain. Joseph, thank you so much for this trip down Melanie Doane lane. Please let our listeners know where they can find you out there on the interwebs.
Well, on the interwebs, you can find me on Twitter at Whalen19, and then over on the Instagrams, you can get me at Joseph Whalen 17, because those two numbers, I don't know why I chose them. I really don't. So if someone could explain to me why I chose 2 different numbers for 2 different social media platform profiles? I'd like to know because I don't know.
I'm sure there's some weird conspiracy theory out there with, the 17 and the 19, and you probably add them together. So I'm sure, 36 means something.
Probably. Who knows? You might know better than me.
All right, man. Thank you so much. And dear listeners, you guys know the drill. If there's an artist that you want us to cover on There Can Only Be One, or an album that you want us to cover on Spin, Shuffle, Skip, hit us up on social media at OnlyOneCast, or go to our website at notthatbadcast.com. And while you're there, make sure you check out all of our other shows, including that episode where we talk about Catherine Rose on It's Not That Bad. Thanks for listening. That's Joseph. I'm Jay. You guys are awesome. This is There Can Only Be One, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. Take care.